We've explored a lot of complex biology here, from DNA damage to inflammatory cascades to cellular communication systems. But let's step back and think about what all this research ultimately means for how we live our daily lives. The science of sunburn and skin cancer tells a bigger story about how our everyday choices interact with biological systems in ways that shape long-term health outcomes. The most fundamental lesson is that small, repeated behaviors matter more than we typically recognize. One sunburn seems insignificant. 15 minutes of sun exposure without protection seems trivial. But multiply those small exposures by thousands of days over decades, and you're looking at enormous cumulative effects at the cellular level. This pattern applies beyond just sun exposure. How we eat every day shapes metabolic health more than occasional splurges. How we move our bodies regularly affects cardiovascular health more than intense, but rare exercise sessions. The biological impact of consistent small choices is profound. Second, this research reinforces that invisible processes matter. You can't feel mutations accumulating in your DNA. You can't sense chronic inflammation at the molecular level. You can't perceive epigenetic changes or declining DNA repair capacity. Health isn't just about what you can see and feel in the moment. It's about what's happening in systems you'll never directly observe. This requires a kind of trust in scientific understanding and a willingness to act on knowledge rather than just immediate sensory feedback. Third, understanding biological mechanisms empowers better decision-making. When you know that UV radiation causes specific molecular damage, that this damage accumulates over time, that your body has protective systems, but they can be overwhelmed. You can make informed choices about sun exposure rather than following arbitrary rules or acting on myths and misconceptions. Knowledge of biological reality is genuinely useful for navigating health choices. There's also a lesson about prevention versus treatment. Once molecular damage has accumulated, once mutations have established themselves, once cells have been epigenetically reprogrammed, reversing these changes is extremely difficult. But preventing them in the first place is relatively straightforward. A thin layer of sunscreen, consistently applied, can prevent an enormous amount of molecular damage. The effort required for prevention is tiny compared to the effort required to treat cancer that develops later. This imbalance between ease of prevention and difficulty of treatment holds true for many health conditions. The research also highlights that our bodies are remarkably resilient, but not infinitely so. Your skin has multiple sophisticated systems for preventing cancer: melanin production, DNA repair, immune surveillance, programmed cell death. These systems work incredibly well, which is why cancer is relatively rare despite universal exposure to risk factors. But every system has limits. Push beyond those limits repeatedly over time, and eventually something fails. Respecting the limits of your body's protective systems is key to maintaining health. Another insight is about the timescales of biological processes. Cells don't suddenly become cancerous. Damage accumulates gradually. Inflammation persists over years. Mutations build up slowly. Cancer development is almost always a long-term process. This means prevention needs to be long-term too. It's not about perfection in the short term, it's about consistent better-than-average choices sustained over decades. This same principle applies to many aspects of health. Finally, the sunburn research illustrates how scientific understanding evolves and deepens. A few decades ago, we knew sun exposure caused skin cancer, but we didn't understand the molecular mechanisms. Now we can trace the process from UV photon hitting DNA through inflammatory cascades through mutation accumulation to cancer development. This deeper understanding opens new opportunities for prevention and intervention. It's a reminder that scientific knowledge is always advancing, and staying informed can reveal new strategies for protecting health. Taking this all together, what does sunburn research teach us about everyday health? It teaches us that consistency matters more than intensity, that invisible processes shape long-term outcomes, that prevention is more powerful than treatment, that understanding mechanisms empowers better choices, and that small daily decisions compound into profound effects over time. These lessons extend far beyond skin cancer. They're fundamental principles of how human biology works and how we can navigate the health challenges we all face. Every time you put on sunscreen, you're not just following a health recommendation, you're engaging with these deeper principles, making a small choice that aligns with biological reality and contributes to long-term well-being. That's what this research ultimately teaches us. Our everyday choices matter enormously, and understanding why they matter helps us make better ones.